Good morning, members, and welcome to this meeting of the full Licensing Committee. Can I ask the clerk just to first of all run through the housekeeping measures, please?
Yes, Chair. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair in case of disruption. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point at the War Memorial in the gardens opposite the front of this building. Finally, please can we ensure that background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on your laptops. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 1 on this morning's agenda, apologies for absence. Do we have any recorded apologies?
Yes, Chair. Apologies for absence received from Councillors Canavan and Howell.
Thank you. Item 2, substitute members. We've received no notification of substitutes for this morning's meeting. Item 3, declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest with regard to the items that are on this morning's agenda? No, thank you, members. Item 4, confirmation of minutes. To confirm the following sets of minutes as an accurate record for the Chair to sign. Licensing Committee of the 14th of May 2025, the Licensing Subcommittees 30th of April, the 7th and 20th of May, the 4th and 17th of June, the 2nd, 29th and 30th of July, the 11th, 13th, 18th and 27th of August, and the 1st of September. Are members happy that I sign those as a true and correct record?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Item 5, public issues. Michelle?
None have been received, Chair.
Thank you. Item 6, the review of the statement of licensing policy. Members, following 2 periods of public consultation, which has been agreed by the members of the Licensing Committee and undertaken in accordance with Section 5 of the Licensing Act 2003, the Licensing Committee, on behalf of the Licensing Authority, must now consider all responses received in respect of the proposed statement of licensing policy and decide, after considering the responses, what amendments should be made to the draft policy. Nananka.
Kind of read my bit. So yeah, Section 5 of the Licensing Act sets out the requirement for the licensing authority to determine and publish its policy every 5 years, setting out how they will exercise their licensing functions. The report before you outlines the process to date and the next steps which will be needed to approve our statement of licensing policy. The policy sets out how the licensing authority intends to operate and promote the licensing objectives in our area. This includes guidance for applicants, as well as information to assist residents who may wish to make a representation. In this case, members approved the proposed draft policy on the 19th of September last year. Full public consultation regarding the draft took place between the 11th of November and the 22nd of December 2024. And there was a further consultation period between the 27th of February and the 17th of March 2025. 10 responses were received, which are set out in Appendix 5, I believe. 4, sorry, got my appendices wrong. And the table in Appendix 4 includes a column with officer comments and recommendations, which we feel would address the feedback received. It's my intention today, with Sarah, to talk you through the consultation responses and the officer recommendations, and we will then ask members to discuss and decide whether recommended changes or other suggested amendments following discussions should be made. Members will be asked to agree any changes, which will then form our final statement of licensing policy for the next 5 years. Once agreed, the final version of the policy will be referred to full council for ratification on, I believe, the 14th of October, which is the next full council meeting. I can confirm that a full equalities impact assessment has been undertaken, which was accepted by our equalities impact panel. The policy is trying to get a balance between a viable nighttime economy relevant to licensing and the protected vulnerable members of the community. The suggestions in the policy aim to provide increased safety and protection for people with protected characteristics. Members are reminded to have regard to the public sector equality duty when making decisions on policy. So that is pretty much it. So if everyone's happy with that, we'll start going through the appendix, and then I thought afterwards we'll open up to any other comments that people may wish to make. So Sarah was going to go through the table and go through the suggested amendments. So Sarah?
Yep, just closed it, hopefully.
159 of the agenda, Councillor Fowler.
There's an option to display an outline which can take you directly to item 6 and expanded license.
Okay, so as Nananka said, there were 10 responses, 8 in the first consultation and 2 further responses when we did the extended consultation, and they were from individuals. So if we go to page 159, Dorset Police set out a number of comments. So firstly, with regard to paragraph 10.2, they're talking about on sales permit in premises should not permit alcohol to be taken from the premises at any time, and that they would expect licenses holders to challenge behaviour. So we are suggesting to amend paragraph 10.2 as shown in bold, so that premises that are offering on sales with terminal hours after midnight are expected to include within their operating schedules details relating to dispersal policies and management of patrons in the vicinity of the premises as they leave. So this should help to reduce the risk of antisocial behaviour occurring both on and off the premises and as they depart from the area. If you are in agreement.
Councillor Chapman-Law.
Am I right in thinking that that's probably a little bit weaker than what the police were suggesting, in terms of like excessive consumption and stuff like that? It doesn't really cover that very well.
It would be a suggested amendment for them to consider in their operating schedule, but premises don't consider that there would be excessive consumption of alcohol. So it would be to, if there had been an excessive consumption of alcohol, you don't set out your operating schedule knowing you're going to, it's to mitigate that and put that in the policy should you, so it wouldn't be fair for a local bar to be compared to a high capacity nightclub where you would expect or more likely to have excessive consumption of alcohol, I would suggest.
Okay, thank you for that. Any further questions? Councillor Fowler.
Sorry.
Following on from the previous statement, are expected to is not the same as will. Why don't we have will display?
Because this is a policy covering all types of application. As Sarah said, you might get an application for a bar, you might get an application for a nightclub. So when you're considering these applications, you can refer to this policy, and you can, if say you get a referral and the licensing subcommittee is considering an application and they haven't done it, you can say, well, why didn't you do it? Because our policy asks you to do that. but we don't want to have it shall for every single application, because this policy is for all types of application that we're dealing with, not just a specific one. We know that there can be issues with alcohol consumption, but then that is the exception rather than the rule. I mean, if members wish to have shall, we can have that in there. That's not a problem.
If I may, Chairman, I can't see why all premises can't be expected to include within their operating schedule details relating to their own dispersal policies and management of patrons. Anyone who's dealing with alcohol, clearly not some of the ones which we deal with, which to do with taxis, but aren't all premises supposed to have proper dispersal and
It's
dealing
good.
with drunken
It's
people?
very good practice to do so, but we can't have standard conditions on all premises licenses. So we would be looking at that. We could include it in our model pool of conditions
As an example.
as an example of a condition for a premises to use, should they believe that they would offer that in their operating schedule. But we can't have blanket conditions for every single licensed premises.
I think we've got to think about the proportionality. If you are a small cafe with 3 covers that, you know, maybe serves a couple of glasses of wine a night, you're not going to have a dispersal policy. And we would then be saying, well, you haven't got a dispersal policy, therefore you're not going to get a license. That's the trouble. You know, so this policy is, as I say, it's a guide for all applicants of every type of premises. You know, you're going to have hotels that serve alcohol. They might not necessarily have dispersal policies because they've only got on sales for patrons, perhaps. So it's a tailoring and trying to get the proportionality for that. We obviously want to address the police concerns, and that's why we're sort of suggesting that. And we would then expect, when we get an application, for the applicants to have considered it. And if they haven't considered it, that could be something that the members then use in their decision making, because it's appropriate for that decision making aspect.
Would it be in order if we change the wording to shall include if appropriate, or is that too much of an ask?
It's your decision, Chair.
Councillor Harman.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say exactly the same thing. So if it was okay to include where appropriate, I worry slightly then that it's a little bit open to interpretation, but it maybe offers a bit more clarity. I was going to suggest the same thing.
Thank you. So is there I'm going to seek general consensus on all these points this morning rather than go to a formal vote, if it's appropriate. So
if I may, Chair, where do you suggest that we're inserting those words, if appropriate, or are you removing words?
So it says midnight are expected to include.
Yes. And then we'll insert if appropriate after that.
Shall include where appropriate. So our members, Councillor Richardson.
I think, or not quite knowing where you are. Is saying we expect all of you to do this.
Thank you. Councillor Bartlett.
I was going to say exactly the same thing. The word expected defines what it is you're required to do. You're then countering that expected with another word that says if appropriate. But, you know, it's a contradiction. So I think the wording is perfectly satisfactory.
Maybe remember, this isn't a condition on a licence. This is consideration for applicants when they're wishing to apply to the licensing authority for a licence or a variation. So this is guidance. This is not a condition that is applied. So maybe.
Any further comments?
I just wanted to pick up on that. I was thinking the same thing, that presumably it's then in our gift to add it as a condition where we find there is a premises that we want it to be on. So in that case, I think I'm happy with it as it is.
Any further comments? So in which case then,
Coming out
sorry,
here.
Chair, Vice Chair.
Thank you. I would concur with Councillor Sidaway in terms of the policies being put forward, offer a toolkit of measures that can be applied on a case-by-case basis, either in subcommittees or on delegated choices. And I personally feel that it fulfils that in its current wording.
Thank you. So are members happy to accept the suggested amendment as set out? Agreed? Thank you.
Do members want us to go through every point or just the suggested amendments? Because obviously the police have done a very thorough and detailed response, which I think was really great, and I'm sure all the members have read it all. And some of what they've put we felt was already included within the policy, which is why we haven't suggested anything. Obviously, if members feel that additional changes should be made, then obviously that can be considered. But otherwise, we'll just go down to the suggested amendments, if that's okay.
I think that would be
Yeah.
appropriate.
Okay, then, Sarah. Oh.
Just a question: has any of this feedback been given to the police at this stage? Was this feedback on what they've submitted so far given to us, and then the feedback would go to the police?
Well, the police would then get a copy of the policy once it's been finalised. We don't go back to every person that's provided us with feedback, you know, as a matter of course. But we will obviously, you know, when it's all finalised, we'll let the police have a copy, and if they have any other comments, you know, we can discuss that. But obviously, this was their chance to make their comments, and this is our responses to those, as it were.
Okay, so moving on to paragraph 11.3, in relation to knife and weapon crime, they've acknowledged that measures should be considered to protect and reduce the number of incidents happening in the premises, if at all. So a suggested amendment would be the 2 bullet points indicated, that applicants are expected to demonstrate within their operating schedule consideration and risk assessment has been undertaken to address the risk of knife weapon use, that there is a risk, particularly in late night on sale venue conditions, requiring the use of handheld metal detectors or knife wands should be discussed with the police. So that's more relevant to the larger nightclubs. And where knife or weapon crime is identified as a risk, premises are encouraged to acquire a bleed control kit kept at the premises with staff adequately trained to use it. Again, I would suggest that was more relevant to the late night high capacity, which also do have first aid providers at these premises and first aid facilities. So it would just be an additional toolkit for them.
Any observations, members? Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. I think this is an excellent amendment to include in the policy. My question would be, are there any criteria for identifying whether weapon or knife crime is an issue for a particular premises?
That would probably be based on intelligence provided by the police, because it would be them that would receive the reports of serious violence and crime, and then they would, you know, either let us know, or obviously they receive copies of any applications, and they would then ask for these sort of conditions or considerations to be made in those applications, because obviously there's a lot of consultation that takes place when an application is submitted, and you know, the police would be the best placed people to deal with that.
Okay, so moving on to 12.8, this is with regard to the provision of late night refreshment.
Sarah, sorry to interrupt. Shall we just vote on each one as we go, so that we don't have to come back? So members are happy with the suggested amendments as set out in 11.3? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so the dispersal relating to late night cafes and takeaways is also addressed at 12.18, where it is suggested to incorporate into that paragraph a sentence at the end to say that in addition, this can lead to increased levels of crime and disorder. So recognising that premises open after 11 o'clock at night for providing takeaway facilities for customers, that if they gather outside, it's creating noise and the increase of litter.
Any comments, members? Happy with the amendment?
Agreed.
Thank you. Sarah?
And then 12.20, an amendment to the bullet point at 12.19 for consideration of measures required to address the risk of late night violence and antisocial behaviour by patrons should be evidenced, which will include staff training and safeguarding policies, and anticipated that additional conditions will be offered in an operating schedule based on the nature of the operating hours, location, and other factors which increase the risk of crime and disorder. So that's addressing again, particularly in relation to late night refreshment houses.
Any observations, members? Councillor Richardson?
Can I just ask, what's late night refreshment? What does it consist of?
So that's the provision of hot food and or drink between the hours of 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. the following day, and it's a licensable activity.
And is that alcohol?
No, it doesn't have to have alcohol. So it's one of the licensable activities under the Act.
Are members happy with the suggested amendment? Yeah.
Agreed.
Thank you.
So moving on to 13.4, this is addressing child sexual exploitation and protecting children and vulnerable people. So a suggested amendment at 13.3 to put an emphasis on the CSE to include matters which include criminal exploitation, county lines, gangs, modern day slavery. As such, it is expected the applicants demonstrate in their operating schedule that suitable and sufficient steps are to be taken to tackle risks specific to their premises, and suggested conditions are provided within Appendix D to address this. So that's within the model pool of conditions. And then moving on to that, with the consideration for the safeguarding of children, that all staff shall be trained in child protection awareness. Such training will include awareness, child criminal exploitation and child sexual exploitation, and county lines identification and reporting. Such training, including refresher training, will be logged and provided not less than every 3 years. A training log shall be made available for inspection by police and an authorised person immediately upon request. A safeguarding log or safeguarding section within the incident book shall be kept at the premises and made immediately available on request of the police or an authorised person. The log must record all concerns raised with regards to safeguard and include the following: the identity of the member of staff who raised the concern, a description of the concern raised including details relating to the young person, and the action and justification for such action undertaken by the member of staff when the concern was raised. When no action is undertaken, a justification for this shall be required.
Any observations, members? Councillor Filer?
I think it's a question more than an observation. Is there somewhere, Sarah, in which says what is a child? Are we talking about people under 16, 18?
It's recognised that it's people under the age of 18.
Okay, so that's a sort of recognised thing. It doesn't need to be specified. Thank you. Chairman, I would say that this is really important and that this is an increasing area, especially modern slavery, and recognising it's terribly important. I'm really pleased they've put that in.
Councillor Farquhar?
May I just ask, just on the mechanical side of things, because this is a change in the regulations. is that where would this be recorded? Would this be in your incident book or your refusal book? I mean, just mechanically, how would a licensed operation train their staff that this would actually be recorded?
If it was a condition on their licence, then it would specify that it would be within their incident book if an incident happened, and the staff training would be in the training logs. So we would check those together.
I just have one question, Sarah. Standard of training. I'm assuming that the training is left to the licence holder. Are there any requirements for a specific level of training or provider? So, in other words, do we as a local authority provide training, specific training for this situation, or has the training got to be provided by an outside body?
We won't provide that training. I believe there's Home Office guidance on where you can receive training and the providers, but there's quite a lot of training and guidance out there on these aspects.
Thank you for that. Any further questions or observations? Councillor Fowler.
I'm really sorry to ask questions, but it's a very odd statement. Such training will be logged and provided not less than every 3 years. I mean, that means you can't do it every 18 months. It's an odd way of writing it. If things have moved on, I'd have thought they might want training. If an incident has happened, they might want to have their training less than 3 years. It says here not less than 3 years.
I think that's a maximum. My understanding of that would be a maximum.
No, it doesn't say that.
Well, yeah, it's within.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be any longer than 3 years. So you could do it shorter if you want to,
You can.
but no longer than every 3 years. So it's not less than every 3 years.
Councillor Sidaway?
Just a question really. The premises that you might apply this condition to, do they largely do this now? And we're just putting a belt and braces around it?
A lot of premises do this already, but again, it's, you know, if police have intel or concerns about a premises, it would tend to be something either big clubs or maybe premises where there's a hotel attached to a cafe, you know, a bar in the hotel, and then, you know, they do tend to, but we can obviously then require it if there are problems, and again, if there's conditions. You know, if there's a review, we can say, well, we would want this condition added. So that tends to be it.
Any further questions or observations? In which case, are members happy with the suggested amendment 13.3? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so 13.16 deals with proxy sales. So proxy sales themselves are an offence under the Licensing Act. It is an offence to do a proxy sale on behalf of somebody under 18. So this is a suggestion from trading standards as well to make premises focus on the risk of that and not ignore the fact that there may be areas inside or outside the premises where youngsters can try and ask over 18s to purchase alcohol, age-restricted products for them. So its suggested amendment is that proxy sales, which is the sale of alcohol to those who then supply it to under 18s, shall be considered and mitigated by considering the premises layout, including unobstructed views of the outside area, and ensuring measures are in place to train and support staff in challenging this activity as necessary. So when we at the moment, when we talk about staff training for underage sales, we also do speak to them about proxy sales, but this furthers that in getting the premises to consider the actual layout.
Any questions or observations? In which case, Councillor Matthews.
Here we go. Yeah, no, just I think it's really sensible actually designing out the potential for it. But I'm just thinking in practicality terms, how it would work, because lots of places, in my experience, looking at the outside, have shutters, and there's not a lot you can see from the shop to the outside to see what's happening. So we're encouraging people to have some sort of CCTV or something. Is that something that we could suggest? I think if there's an obstructive view about the potential for having some sort of CCTVs as a monitor.
Just going, if the next bullet point that we will be discussing actually does address part that, in that we've suggested a further amendment to consider measures to minimise the risk of proxy sales, including keeping window displays to a minimum, line of sight from register to outside areas, and training on staff who to identify and challenge. So that may address your
Chair, if I may, yeah, it does if you don't have sort of shutters, but a lot of places the windows tend to have shutters down all the time, don't they? Particularly sort of off licenses and so on. So I'm just actually thinking how you protect that area, and maybe you need to be a little bit more proactive with that as the sort of applicant. Just an observation, really.
Obviously, you're talking about premises that are already licensed. So if there were concerns raised about existing licensed premises and there was a review because of a proxy sale issue or something, at that point, whoever's seeking the review could say, well, we're going to make you remove your shutters because you haven't got a line of sight and you've been having proxy sales. Or if it's a new application and it's in an area where there are concerns with youth drinking or street drinkers who may supply to youth because they go in and buy it and then they share the alcohol. And it's a hotspot area and there's known intel, usually the police or our community safety people would comment on those applications. At that point, they'd say, well, hang on a minute, our policy says this needs to be considered. Looking at your layout, looking at your plans, or looking at the photos that we've asked you to provide, we're not happy with that. Therefore, we're going to put in a rep or a review. It would then come to committee who would say, well, and that's sort of how it would be put in practice.
Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, kind of on that same point. Obviously, CCTV was mentioned, some years picked up. Is there any requirement under with the CCTV that when they're on these places where they have to have a monitor by the till? The reason for that, thinking CCTV generally covers way more than you could cover line of sight, and would be a far better way of monitoring for proxy sales if there is a monitor by the till.
We don't require CCTV as the licensing authority. That would be down to so the police tend to say, well, you will have CCTV, and then their officers go in and then provide the guidance on what they want and where the monitors are and whatever. So we don't have a specific. I mean, if they've offered CCTV, then but the CCTV doesn't say, or our conditions or our policy doesn't specifically say, if you've got CCTV, you will have a monitor here, because again, it's all about proportionality, and it's on a case by case basis.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson.
Just a question. When I was reading through, did I see something that said licensed premises are not responsible for the outer area? Activities outside their premises. I can't remember where I saw that, but
so that relates to persons leaving a licensed premises and moving on to wherever they're going next. That's what that refers to. This refers to what we're saying here is monitoring people outside the premises with an intention to go in to commit the offence of proxy sale. So it's slightly different.
Usually they're not bright enough to move around the corner so that they're out of sight.
it only seems slightly different to me.
It's just
they've got to be responsible for people doing illegal things outside.
Well, they're responsible for people as they leave their store or premises, but obviously as they move up from the street, and they're no longer as responsible. But what we tend to find is with proxy sales, it's pretty obvious that the child is lurking outside waiting to grab the alcohol as the people leave, tends to be. Or even, I think it was witnessed, wasn't it, by some of our officers in over the summer, that they were in the store actually. And the deal was done within the store, and obviously we've taken action.
Thank you. If there are no further questions or observations, are members happy with the suggested amendment to add the bullet point to para 1315? Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so 16.4 and 16.5, this is addressing, as you know, we don't have a cumulative impact area in BCP. So this is to just extend on the expectation that premises applying for licenses have a good understanding of the area, of the demographic, and they can include then mitigating conditions which address the area that they're in. So the applicant being expected to demonstrate they understand the local area demographics, including climate disorder hotspots, proximity to residential premises, housing provided for and treatment centres aimed at vulnerable people, including addictions, and the proximity to areas where children, vulnerable people congregate, such as schools, youth clubs, and any premises which primarily or routinely offer services aimed at children.
Any questions or observations, members? No. Are we happy with the suggested amendment at 16.4? Agreed. Thank you. Can I just go back to 15.3? We didn't actually agree, but it was mentioned in your presentation with the previous one. So are members happy with the suggested amendment and bullet point to para 15.4? Thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. So the next one, 19.2, this was dealing with intelligence which is shared between the police and the licensing authority, and they're working together with other of the responsible authorities, for example, trading standards and environmental health. And the police came up with the old problem-solving matrix, which was the 7 steps, and they now have amended that to have the structure of engagement, education and enforcement. So it's just to amend and delete 19.1 and replace it with the licensing authority has established a joint working agreement with Dorset Police and other enforcing authorities. This agreement assists officers to manage existing premises through a structure of engagement, education and enforcement to support licence holders to promote the licensing objectives and provide a positive addition to the communities they serve.
Any questions or observations, members? Councillor Hilliard.
Thanks, Chair. Just on that, so like pub watch and things like that, are they coordinated by the police or is it just an informal group?
No, it's the group organise themselves and manage themselves. The police and ourselves and any other authorities are invited to that group, but we are actively involved with it.
Are members happy with the suggested amendment? Thank you very much.
24.2, this is to invite the licensing authority to consider safeguarding against violence against women and girls and the exploitation of children. So we've suggested an amendment to add a bullet point that take all reasonable steps to prevent violence against women and girls and to protect anyone who appears to be vulnerable, and also to understand that any exploitation of a child is unacceptable and a crime. Staff should be made aware of the need to identify and report any child safeguarding concerns.
Members? Are we happy with the suggested amendments? Yeah, thank you.
And they then have a final proposal with regard to the designated premises supervisor. And in respect of what they have brought up, we have suggested an amendment to the wording at 24.8 that Dorset Police have made the licensing authority aware of some concerns regarding practices with persons not identified as the premises licence holder or designated premises supervisor having control over the licensed premises and in effect running a premises behind the scenes. This may be reasons of criminality, for example, whereby individuals may possess a relevant offence under the Licensing Act, which would preclude them from being a DPS. This licensing authority takes a very serious view of instances whereby it believes this to be the case and will carefully consider any application made for review of such an existing licence. The licensing authority considered the police to be their main source of advice on matters relating to the promotion of the crime and disorder and will be supportive of the police when genuinely exceptional circumstances exist, for example, whereby the Chief Officer of Police cites that exceptional circumstances of a case are such that granting an application for a change of a DPS would not promote the the licensing objectives.
Would undermine the crime prevention objective.
Yeah, well.
Yeah. They obviously cut and paste got a little bit tired at that time.
Any questions or observations on that one at all? Councillor Kelly.
Just an observation that this is a really welcome additional proposal. Increasingly, we are seeing in subcommittees questionable business structures and DPSs that are either not present or not upholding their duty. So I think this is a great addition.
Agreed. Councillor Farquhar.
Yes, no, just to echo the Vice Chair, it's one of the wriggles, shall we say, that it's good to have it in the policy so that when it's considered, even when it's kind of considered that review, is that we can stop this practice or at least identify this as the reason for refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Farquhar. Any further observations or questions? It's the wording that was missed from the copy and paste. Members happy? Thank you.
So the next response was the Bournemouth Town Pastors. They have suggested an amendment to their paragraph relating to them at 21.2. As they said, it was inaccurate, and they would like it to read that the Bournemouth Street Pastors were established in 2017. They are a group of trained Christian volunteers who patrol the Bournemouth Town Centre from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. every Saturday night. They assist anyone in need. They carry a radio which is linked to the CCTV, police, paramedics and all the pubs, clubs. On their patrols, they will support individuals who have become vulnerable and assist them to ensure they get home safely. The town pastors are also a listening ear to those who may be struggling with any issues. They carry water, flip-flops, blankets, portable defibrillator, mobile phone, power bank, sick bags, bleed kit, information sheets and many other relevant items.
I think there are definitely a supportive group for our late night revellers. Any questions or observations at all? Councillor Kelly. Oh, Councillor Chapman.
I noticed in their statement it says 2:30, whereas in our amended paragraph it says 2.
We'll double check with them.
I think it's because what is in the statement was the incorrect statement. So they've said that was incorrect, so please put that.
Should we?
Yeah, so we will double check the facts, but yeah, it will either be 2 or 2:30.
Thank you. Members happy with those suggested amendment? Thank you.
2:30. 2:30.
Chairman, I don't know if it's proper, but they do a fantastic voluntary job. And they're dedicated. They don't worry if it's raining or if there's thunder or lightning or anything else. And I think if it's appropriate, if we could send thanks to them from this committee, it would, for the work that they do so magnificently, I think it would be a good thing.
I see no problem with that. Members happy for a?
Very much so.
You want to do that on behalf of the chair and the licensing committee?
Yes, please.
Yep, so if I
Yep.
draft something to you and get you to
Super.
check that, we'll send that out.
Lovely.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks, Michelle. Sarah?
So another suggested condition, this is a condition suggested in response to an individual respondent, and to change paragraph 12.19 to the bullet point with regarding the provision of bins outside to reduce littering by patrons, and include and consideration of directing staff to keep area outside premises clear of litter.
Councillor Harman.
Thank you. I fear my comments on this might be, the discussion we had earlier might be applicable, but I was just wondering if we could be a bit stronger in the wording here. So it says, doesn't it, consideration of directing staff to keep area outside premises clear of litter. I'm wondering why it's considering getting the staff to do that rather than that will happen.
Again, unless it's a condition on the licence, where if you were putting a condition on a licence, you certainly wouldn't be putting considering, you would, because it would be a direction to do something. So it's, you know, for an applicant to consider whether they would need that to prevent public nuisance.
Thank you. So just a case by case basis, if applicable, and then it will be put in with firmer language. Thank you.
Councillor Richardson?
It was similar to Emily. I'd made a note when I went through. Why are we using the word reduce? Why don't we use the word eliminate?
Because it's unreasonable to eliminate littering.
Is it?
Well,
It's just stronger than reduce. Okay, well, there's a bit of litter, we won't bother.
I think how are you going to reduce litter, eliminate littering?
It's just a stronger word sending a stronger message is what I'm thinking.
Be able to enforce that.
It's not, yeah, you're asking an applicant to tell you how they're going to eliminate littering?
Yeah.
That's up to you.
Okay, okay.
Any further observations or questions? Are members happy with the suggested amendment at para 12.19?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you.
Thank you. 7.4, Dorset and Wiltshire Fire and Rescue Service have quite rightly noticed that their title is actually Rescue Authority. So that
Agreed.
agreed.
Yeah.
And they also wanted to add the bullet point that the applicant is to ensure a suitable and sufficient fire risk assessment is carried out and recorded. That again, that's a requirement under the fire reform order anyway, but it's just to acknowledge that.
Agreed.
And finally, with regard to Appendix C, the application process, we have included in that the requirements of the plan, the layout plan, what the regulations state. Again, the regulations, they have to comply with it anyway, but it's setting it out quite clearly for them. And Appendix D includes the requirement for the risk assessment, again, as previously, just to include that within there. So just dealing with those two appendices, they're legislative anyway.
Didn't want to read that out?
Councillor
No.
Bartlett?
Presumably this reflects legislation, but this policy is reviewed 5-yearly, is it? So,
Yeah, it's reviewed every 5 years.
So if there's a change to the regulations, fire regulations, how do those then get encompassed within this policy?
This is
They would override it anyway. So we would always go with the latest legislation and requirements in any event. So it would be amended as a matter of course.
Any further observations, questions, comments? No? Are members happy that the Appendix D be amended as set out?
Sorry, but just thinking about that, I mean, why, if the legislation exists, why do we not just reference to that legislation in the guidelines rather than detail all of the detail that's already contained in other legislation?
I think it was to highlight that the requirement. I think the fire also wanted to highlight the need for the risk assessment and the areas for the fire extinguishers and the emergency lighting, but that's duplicated anyway by the Licensing Act legislation for the plan requirements.
So that is the Licensing Act
Yeah.
requirements, isn't it? So the detailed, all those bullet points are the requirements under the Licensing Act for the plans. And then that's why there's a link there that we've included there that is already in there. It's just amendments to paragraphs, and we've amended the link so that the link goes to the Dorset and Fire licensing and events, but just for clarity, because we do get applicants who don't look at links and do, so we've just set out quite clearly what the Licensing Act says is the minimum requirement for the plans when you're submitting an application. I mean, just what you were saying earlier about, you know, it's a 5-yearly policy. It can be reviewed, amended and tweaked at any time within that 5 years. If things change, we can bring it back to members. So it is a live document.
And that would normally be the case, wouldn't it? If there's an amendment in legislation, it's automatically reviewed, isn't it? You know, to keep it up to date. As ignorance of the law is no defence. Right, are members happy with the suggested amendment?
Agreed.
Thank you. Sarah?
Okay, so the next one is an individual who highlights the same issue as the previous individual with regard to 12.19, and it's a slightly different wording. So I think we need to decide which one you want to go with. The one we've previously discussed and agreed, or there's this one: the provision of bins outside to reduce littering by patrons, and consideration of directing staff to keep area outside clear of litter. I think it says the same thing.
So it's the same suggested
Same
thing. So yeah,
that's been
it
agreed.
should have just sort of been seed above, maybe. Yeah, it's difficult when you've got so many things coming up.
Councillor File.
I'm glad this has come back because I really thought I ought to agree with Councillor Emily. Why do we say consideration of directing staff? If we just said directing staff to keep the area outside the premises, I mean, it's not terribly strong. It's not punishment.
It's not a condition. This isn't the condition, as we said before. You wouldn't, if you were wording it as a condition, you wouldn't use the word consideration because it would be unenforceable. You would be using the word shall direct staff to keep the area outside.
So this is the guidance. So we're saying when you're making an application, we want you to consider whether you're going to ask your staff to keep the place clear of litter in your application. So as part of their operating schedule, they would then offer it as a condition, which will then say our staff shall on a nightly basis go out 2 times a month or 2 times an hour or whatever to pick litter. But this is not a condition. This is what we're asking.
I understand that, but maybe it should be. And I think I'm probably the only person in this room who can remember when McDonald's first came to Old Christchurch Road, and part of the condition of allowing them to be there, it was outrage for Bournemouth McDonald's in the day, but they had to keep they didn't have to keep general litter out of the way, but they had to keep litter emanating from their premises. That was part of their, I don't know if it came through licensing or how it came, but part of the agreement was that McDonald's packaging and stuff, which was on the pavement outside their premises, would have to be put in bins. And that was, I remember that quite clearly. So I can't see why. I mean, they can't be expected to pick up other people's rubbish, which have been dumped out of cars and things, but at least the rubbish which has come out of their premises in their packaging, the cans or whatever else which is, or the burger packaging, I can't see why we can't make it a condition.
Would you like me to answer that? That's a really good example of how an applicant has offered a condition to mitigate the litter. So that's a really good example of how McDonald's stepped up, or it would have been that if it had been objected to and it came to a hearing, that they were given that condition to control their litter. So they would have considered what was in the statement of licensing policy as a way and offered a condition as such. And that's what that bullet point deals with in the statement. So it jogs people to think, oh, my business is a takeaway business, it's going to produce a lot of litter, therefore I should consider the litter and how I'm going to direct my staff to control that litter. So that's a really good example, thank you.
So is there a way that we can have it within our conditions that it should be a serious consideration, especially with their own litter?
It is model, it's in, I think it's contained within our model pool of conditions, but as I said before, we can't do blanket conditions, every application on its own merit.
Could we just clarify what licensing conditions that McDonald's would actually come under? Because to my understanding, they don't offer late night refreshments, and it's something off their own back. It's just, for an example, I think it's an example of a trading business being a good neighbour as opposed to something which is a licensable policy part.
Some McDonald's do trade after 11 o'clock, which is why they require the condition, the license. But yeah, but I don't think we can discuss McDonald's conditions within this meeting.
So yeah, it's any business that is a licensable behaviour, e.g. late night refreshments for consideration. Yeah.
So the point we have is that this wording is slightly different to what we've already agreed.
I didn't mean to mislead you. It is the same wording.
Well, unfortunately, I can't look both at the same time. Consideration of directing staff to keep area outside premises clear of litter. Okay. So are members happy? Thank you.
So the next respondent was the Bournemouth and District Law Society. They suggested that Appendix 3 was made clear, and so the new or variation to premises licence application process has been inserted. And I think, oh yeah, you need to agree.
And you've also highlighted that suggested deleted 1313 and retain 1310 as part and parcel of the Law Society's.
Yes, and also the condition paragraph 22.5 just include the words may be subject to formal enforcement action, which relates to planning conditions that are on premises which aren't duplicated on licenses.
Thank you. Any questions or observations, members? Councillor
I
Kelly?
would make an observation here on kind of the general tone from the consultee is that the policy is too verbose and that it acts as a regulatory straitjacket with some of the things that I picked out. The reason we have a verbose policy, I would say, is because of the amount and detail of consultation that we go into and amending according to feedback. I do think that we have a comprehensive policy, and whilst I do note the points, I personally take it as a positive that we have a comprehensive policy document.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Any further observations or questions? In which case, are members happy with the amendments? Thank you.
That's it. There are no further.
Okay, well, thank you very much, members, for that. And I'd also like to thank the workshop who attended in the initial review of the policy. So just to double check on the recommendation is that members consider consultation responses and feedback, and if necessary, amend and draft document and recommend a final version of the statement of licensing policy for adoption by full council on the 14th of October. Are members all in agreement? Thank you very much. Thank you. Item 7 on this morning's agenda is the board plan. Ananka.
Thank you. So on the forward plan, we've got today's agenda, which was the statement of licensing policy. So that has now been met and done. Item 2 is a review of our Hackney carriage and private hire driver vehicle and operator policies. That's all due and ready to come to you next month. That'll be a good meeting. And then I've got the 11th of December down, but it's actually the 9th, is it? I'm very confused about the next date of this meeting, but we've got the pleasure boat and boat persons draft policy coming before you again. It was considered quite some time ago and then never moved forward for reasons. So the draft has been tweaked with consultation, so it's coming back to members in December. Date to be confirmed. It is the 11th of December. I don't know. I've got 9th from. And then we've got the statement of licensing principles under the Gambling Act. It says date to be determined for 2025. I think we're going to have to move that forward to date to be determined for 2026. We still have not had the updated guidance from the Gambling Commission. We did update a light touch policy last year, so we have a valid policy. They're reviewed every 3 years anyway, so as we're going, it might come back around for review anyway. But that policy is very much guided by the Gambling Commission. They provide very, very detailed guidance on what they expect licensing, the statement of license gambling principles should be. So we're waiting for that date. So once we know that, we can update it further. And then item 5 is the council responsibilities to taxi drivers, and a briefing was sent to all members previously by myself. So hopefully everyone's had that and they were happy, content with that. Can I just ask that we add a forward item for the December policy to consider fee review for next year, because March does cause us a little bit of stress because it's very close to the April and we have to consult and advertise parts of the taxi one. So we thought we'd try to get into the December one. So if fee review,
Yeah.
taxi, gambling, all that lot.
Thank you, Nananka. Members happy with the forward plan review? Thank you. And then we just finish off with committee briefing and training sessions. Linda?
Oh,
for
sorry, at
noting.
the end of the forward plan, yes. Sorry, I can probably cover that bit. So at the end of the forward plan, it just highlights that we did a subcommittee hearings refresher training session back in March, and we did a sex establishment training and briefing session as well in March. If any member has any ideas of any other training sessions or things that you might like to be covered, can I just ask that you contact me and I'll liaise with officers to make sure that we can have that as a training session? Or if you've got any ideas now, I'm open to taking a note of those.
Members?
Chair, there
Councillor
have
Farquhar.
been some changes so to the to the licensing committee recently due to changes in the political balance and also changes in the membership of the council as a whole. So I know that the refresher training was very much appreciated, but we're now in September. Should we not be scheduling a refresher training for those new members, and also a refresher training for those that are somewhat more experienced on the committee?
Can I answer that? Just to say that the new recently appointed members have actually attended external training with the Institute of Licensing. So they've gone off and done a 4 days training and are up to speed with everything. And they've also had an opportunity to speak with Linda to cover some BCP sort of the ways that we do things. So they're fully up to speed and are now, they've watched a couple of, well, more than a couple of committees and are fully incorporated onto the rota and have been hearing subcommittees. So we're all good on that. Okay.
Thanks, Michelle. Right. There being no further business to conduct, I close the meeting. Oh, Councillor Richardson.
Can I just ask, because I've got a couple of pages of comments on the policy, you don't need those comments, no?
No, it's all been, yeah,
Okay.
thank you. Councillor Keddy.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the subject of training, I wonder if we could do some subcommittee chair training for potential new chairs, both from the new intake and the existing pool of members. I would note that currently we have 4 regular subcommittee chairs out of 14 members. And it would be really good if we could bring some more subcommittee chairs on board. Thank you.
Certainly, I'll look into arranging that with Linda, and perhaps if I send out an email to see if we've got any willing volunteers, unless anyone wants to put their hand up now.
Thanks, Michelle. Councillor Fowler.
It's a good question because I don't quite get it. The licensing policy that we've got, can things ever be changed? Or are we always bound by what's there and what's always been done? If there's something we think should not be done, how do we go about getting that looked at? Or, I mean, whenever I ask a question, someone, we can't do that because it would impact, it would, and I get that, but times move on and people move on and situations move on. And if we wanted to change something, how would we go about it? Is it in law? I don't quite.
I think you need to maybe give us a bit more detail on what you want to change, because obviously we've just gone through the consultation on our new policy that we're agreeing for this next 5-year period.
Yes.
You know, and when we discuss the draft, that is the time to suggest changes as the members.
So that's when it would be, when we're going to look at it in 5 years' time. I'm thinking of sexual establishment premises, which I've had quite a lot of representations that people would like to see changed, and I've got no idea how we'd go about changing them.
I think that's a much bigger, wider issue that you need to take up with the portfolio holder.
So if we just start generally with a policy, so the policy that we've been discussing this morning, the statement of licensing policy, that if you think of that is just like guidance to a new applicant and guidance for how you would make your decisions. I mean, that's the template. So the idea is when somebody decides, I want to open a licensed premises in Bournemouth, they should be consulting the statement of licensing policy. That outlines how you think as a committee, and it gives suggestions of the type of thing that they have to consider. So when they then make their application, including their operating schedule, they would then include the particular type of conditions that we have an expectation that they would. So that's why the wording has been used in the policy like that. So the policy, once it's approved by full council in October, well, fingers crossed it's approved by full council in October, that will be the policy. So a policy, it's not set in stone, and you can deter from it if there's a particular reason. If you're making any decision, that's what your policy says. But if you've got good reason to, not make your decision in accordance with the policy, as long as you've got proper reasons to do that, you can do that. So if there were any major flaws in the policy going forward that we realised, or there was a slight change if there was changes in legislation, even though that policy has been made for 5 years, that's just the review date. We can bring it back to committee if we felt there were substantial changes that needed to be made. So that's that policy. It is a sort of a moving live document, as Anank has already said.
So I hope this is, I don't know if this is being recorded or not, but so back in the day, fighting with dogs was a great entertainment, but we live in a different time.
We do.
And that obviously changed at some stage, and fox hunting changed. We don't allow it anymore, and things move on. And if there's something that we do allow that a lot of people feel we shouldn't, how do we go about looking at that?
Yeah, so basically, if it's within the gift of the council to stop it, then that has to be then a council decision that they were going to go down that route. So I know you've mentioned the sex establishments. Yeah, so you can have a sex establishment policy. Any local authority can have a sex establishment policy, but you don't need to have a sex establishment policy. So we've already decided as a committee that it's probably not the decision of the licensing committee that we are going to work on a sex establishment policy. We made the point, and I think it was agreed, that had to be a decision further up the chain, up the council. So, well, that would be for you to go to your portfolio holders for, I mean, I don't know how any new thing happens at the council. I mean, these are political decisions that you might make, and then you feed it into that arena, and then it comes down to the portfolio holders. I assume they bring it to cabinet.
It was because it wasn't a statutory requirement.
Yeah, there's no it isn't a statutory requirement to have it. Now, making any policy costs money. Making a sex establishment policy will cost the council a lot of money. Now, that's not me saying you shouldn't do it. That consideration has to be considered when somebody decides that we want as a council a sex establishment policy. So somebody's got to decide, we think this is what BCP Council should be spending X amount of money on. And then we will just do what we're asked to do. The licensing officers do what they're asked to do. We'll do what we're asked to do. And obviously it would be likely that would be the policy would eventually come to this committee. Yeah, so it's got to start somewhere high, and that's what we've always said about that policy. So you probably know better than me, Councillor Filer, how some of these ideas start, and then, we then will deal with it when it gets down, and that's what the instructions are. That's what we'll do, definitely.
Councillor Keddy?
I would just like to thank Councillor Filer for that question regarding SEV policy. This is something we have discussed at quite some length, including inviting the Head of Public Protection to advise a previous licensing committee. There is quite a rich history of why we don't currently have a SEV licensing policy, which I'm quite happy to have a chat with you about afterwards. But one of the conclusions when this was last brought to committee was it's non-statutory, and there would need to be a cost justification brought either to Cabinet or full council in order to progress and get this kicked off again. It is a point of interest for me, having sat on a wide range of SCV. I think I've sat on every single SCV subcommittee since 2023, close to. But yeah, there is some discussion to be had about this, I feel. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keddy. Right. There being no further business to conduct, I will close the meeting, but I would just ask members to remain in their seats because we have a briefing from the licensing team afterwards to discuss. So,
I'm just going to end the live stream now, Chair. Meeting closed. Thank you. Do you bear with me because it's a bit.
I just need to find it.